Hello everyone. Welcome to the channel. I'm Six-Path Weeb, and you're watching a space dedicated to reimagining the shinobi world through creative storytelling and fan-driven theories. Today, we're exploring a compelling what-if scenario. What if Naruko could hear Kurama's thoughts since birth? Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. This content is created purely for entertainment and discussion purposes. I do not own any of the anime footage featured in these videos. All rights and credits belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. Let's dive in. The night was soaked in chaos and crimson fire. The nine-tailed fox, Kurama, roared as the hidden leaf crumbled under the weight of its fury. Buildings cracked like eggshells, and people scattered like leaves in a storm. Amid this pandemonium, a tiny cry pierced the night, sharp, raw, alive. A baby girl had been born. Naruko Uzumaki opened her eyes for the first time, her hair a brilliant gold flame, her cheeks marked with faint, whisker-like birthmarks. She didn't know the world she had entered, nor the burden laid upon her in her first breath. But even as the ritual began, Minato and Kushina offering their lives to seal the nine tails, Naruko heard something no newborn should. So, this is the prison, came the low, thunderous growl. It wasn't from outside. It echoed inside her, resonating in her tiny ribs. And you are the jailer. That voice became the first thing Naruko truly knew. Even before she could walk or talk, she understood that something lived within her. Something angry. Bitter. But not entirely cruel. It whispered when she cried. It scoffed when she crawled. It grumbled when she giggled. As a baby, she couldn't comprehend words, but emotion translated effortlessly. Loneliness. Frustration. An ancient, powerful sadness. Kurama didn't expect the girl to respond. He certainly didn't expect to feel anything for her beyond annoyance. Yet, from the start, Naruko was unlike anything he had imagined. She didn't fear him. Couldn't, not truly. To her, his voice was like a second heartbeat, ever present, strangely comforting. As she grew, so too did their strange connection. By age 3, Naruko could form sentences, though she often got strange looks for the way she talked to herself. "No, I won't eat that. It smells weird." She'd shout to empty air. Adults chalked it up to imagination. Children mocked her for her weird invisible friend. But the truth was far stranger. She was arguing with a centuries-old fox demon sealed inside her soul. Kurama was often irritated by her childish whims. He tried to intimidate her early on, thinking he could silence her with a growl or a cold threat. But Naruko would only blink, tilt her head, and laugh. "You sound funny when you're mad," she once said, making the demon genuinely speechless for the first time in decades. She didn't understand what he was. Not fully. Not yet. By the time she was 5, Naruko knew something was wrong. People in the village looked at her like she was dirt. Worse. Like she was dangerous. They didn't talk to her. They didn't want her in their stores. Children were pulled away by anxious parents. It wasn't just loneliness, it was rejection, simmering and constant. That's when Kurama began speaking more often. "They fear you because of me," he told her one day, his voice low with disdain. "Because they know what's inside you." Naruko sat on the swing outside the orphanage, her small hands gripping the ropes until her knuckles turned white. "What are you?" "A monster," they'd say. "A demon. The nine-tailed fox. I almost destroyed this village the day you were born." Most children would have screamed. Run. Cried. Naruko simply nodded. "Are you still mad about it?" Kurama chuckled. "It was not kind, but it wasn't cruel either. Always. But not at you, brat. Not at you." Their bond, already unusual, began to deepen. Kurama started teaching her things, little things at first. How to breathe through her anger. How to listen to the wind. How to fall without hurting herself too badly. Not chakra training. Not yet. But survival. Instinct. Focus. He didn't tell her everything. He couldn't. The seal was still too rigid, too controlling. But sometimes, when her emotions surged, the line between them blurred. She'd feel his rage like wildfire in her veins. His sorrow like rain behind her eyes. It was confusing. Overwhelming. But also empowering. By the time she entered the ninja academy, Naruko was different. Still loud, still clumsy at times, still underestimated. But there was a fire in her that didn't burn out. A confidence too strong for someone so reviled. The teachers noticed. So did the Hokage. So did the children, especially Sasuke Uchiha, who saw the way her eyes flared when challenged. Naruko didn't know the full extent of her power. But she knew she was not alone. Kurama didn't like to admit it, but he had begun to feel protective. He hated the village. Hated the shinobi. Hated everything. Except perhaps the little blonde girl who somehow made him laugh with her ridiculous antics and questioned his every snide remark. One day, he told her when she asked why the villagers wouldn't change, "You'll have the power to make them see you. All of you. Not just the cage." She didn't know what he meant. But she believed him. For the first time in centuries, the demon fox believed in something too. When the fog cleared over the land of waves, and the bridge stood firm as a new symbol of resilience, Naruko walked away from the battlefield with no blood on her hands and no medals on her chest, but she carried something far more valuable: understanding. Haku's eyes haunted her, not because he was an enemy, but because he wasn't. For the first time since she had been shunned as a child, she saw herself in someone else. Kurama didn't say much for days afterward. His silence wasn't cold, it was contemplative. Naruko felt it, like sitting beside a storm that had finally calmed. She didn't push him. Instead, she filled the quiet with humming, casual chatter, thoughts about how to help Tazuna fix the bridge railings, and questions, always questions. "Do you think people like Haku are born that way, or do they become that way?" Kurama responded days later, "Just once. They become. Just like me." It wasn't much, but it was everything. When Team 7 returned to the Leaf, their names weren't in any headlines. No crowds greeted them. But Iruka smiled wider than usual when Naruko passed his window. And the old woman at the dengo shop gave her 2 sticks instead of 1. Small things. Invisible to others. But to Naruko, they were signs. Signs that maybe, just maybe, she was being seen. She threw herself into training, not to become stronger in combat, but to master control. Kurama, now more of a reluctant mentor than an ever-angry cellmate, began teaching her how to sense the flow of chakra, not just wield it. He told her of the ocean inside every person, the calm, the storms, the tides. "Yours is wild," he'd murmur, "but not aimless. It listens to you. Most people fight their chakra. You? You talk to it." Naruko took those lessons seriously. Every night she meditated, cross-legged on her rooftop, eyes close to the stars. She listened to her breath. To the tiny flickers of chakra inside her fingers. To the deep pulse that was Kurama's presence beneath her thoughts. That's how the next mission found her, not with a scream or a battle cry, but a letter delivered by a hawk. A diplomatic escort. No threat expected. A C-rank mission with A-rank implications. Team 7 was to escort a scholar from the land of rivers, an archivist named Sano, across a winding trade route where political tensions brewed silently. The client was elderly, sharp-eyed, with a mind full of history and a body slowed by age. He was writing a book about the shinobi wars, and he wanted peace to be more than a theory. Naruko, surprisingly, was chosen to lead the mission's communication detail. Not because she was the most skilled, but because, as Kakashi put it, you listen before you speak. That's more valuable than people realize. That night, under a moonlit tent with quiet embers crackling in a fire pit, Sano asked her a strange question. "What do you think makes a person dangerous?" Naruko paused, looking down at the tea in her hands. Kurama stirred, curious. "Being alone too long," she said finally. Sano raised an eyebrow. "Not power? Anger? Fear?" She shook her head. "Those things come after. If someone's alone for too long, they forget how to explain why they hurt. That's when people stop listening. And that's when they break." Kurama, nestled deep inside her spirit, felt something shift. He didn't speak. He just listened. Over the following days, Naruko built a connection with the old scholar, not through jutsu or skill, but conversation. She learned how he had lost his family during the Second War. How he believed stories could change what weapons could not. How he once dreamed of building a library that stretched across the nations. She helped him up slopes. Laughed at his dry humor. And every time tensions flared between traders or villagers they passed, Naruko stepped in, not with threats, but with questions. "Why do you think they acted that way? What would it take to make peace feel safe again?" Her questions softened tempers. Her curiosity disarmed suspicion. People expected ninja to glare or intimidate. They didn't expect a girl with sunfire hair to ask about dreams. Kurama noticed. He studied. Every time she reached someone's heart without raising her voice, he pulled further from the rage that once defined him. "You could be something new," he said one morning, as the mist rolled over a riverbank. "Not a jinchuriki. Not a weapon. A bridge." Naruko smiled, even though no one else could hear him. I don't want to be a bridge, she whispered. I want to be a person who builds them. Sasuke noticed the change. He didn't speak of it, but in the way he watched her talk with a merchant, or calm a suspicious villager, he began to understand that Naruko's strength wasn't loud, it was rooted. Sakura began asking her for help with chakra control, sensing a calmness in her that she once dismissed as simple optimism. And Kakashi? He simply began trusting her with more responsibility, no words needed. By the end of the mission, when Sano stepped off the trail into his home village and turned to bow, he said only one thing. You remind me of someone who never gave up on people. Naruko bowed in return. I had someone who didn't give up on me, either. Later, as Team 7 walked under a rising sun, Kurama asked quietly, was that true? Naruko shrugged. You're still here, aren't you? And for once, Kurama didn't reply with sarcasm or growls. He just let her feel it, the quiet warmth of presence. They weren't enemies. Not anymore. Not just jailer and prisoner. Not even student and teacher. They were two souls learning, together, how not to be alone. After the mission with Sano, something changed in Naruko. Not in a dramatic, earth-shaking way. Not in a way anyone could point to and name. But inside, beneath skin and chakra and breath, she felt it, the quiet certainty that her path was different. The world expected her to fight her way to recognition. Instead, she began listening more, to people, to the silences between them, and most of all, to Kurama. Their bond had deepened into something rare. Kurama no longer barked orders or insults from behind the bars of the seal. He didn't need to. Naruko didn't treat him like a prisoner or a weapon. She treated him like someone who had been hurt and left behind too many times. She knew what that felt like. And now, she wondered, were there others like her? Not just Jinchuriki. People with monsters inside them who weren't monsters themselves. She started asking questions in hushed corners of the Hokage Tower. Not the kind that rang alarms, but quiet, persistent ones. Have any of the other villages reached out about their Jinchuriki? Do they train together? Do they talk? The answer was always the same, no. The world treated Jinchuriki as containment units, walking bombs that could be used or feared, but never understood. Even the Hokage, who had always been kind to her, struggled to speak openly about it. Kurama scoffed. They hide us from each other so they can keep control. Each village is too afraid that one of us might get too strong. As if we haven't all been broken in different ways. Naruko sat on her rooftop one night, wind threading through her hair, and asked aloud, what would happen if we talked to each other? If we stopped pretending we were alone? Kurama didn't answer immediately. When he did, it wasn't with fire, but with something rare, hope. Then maybe. We'd stop hating ourselves. She began with Gaara. It took months. Quiet months. Soft months. No missions. Just diplomacy through letters, through the slow trust built between the Kazekage and Konoha after the war wounds began to scar instead of bleed. Officially, it was a training exchange between Genin squads. Unofficially, it was Naruko's idea, a chance to meet another person who carried a tailed beast inside them. When she arrived in Suna, the air was dry and tense. Gaara didn't speak much. His sand shifted when she got too close, as if it didn't know whether to protect or attack. But Naruko didn't force anything. She talked. Not about missions. Not about jutsu. But about things that mattered only to people like them. What's the first thing you remember feeling your beast think? She asked once, sitting beside him on a cracked rooftop under a molten dusk. Gaara blinked, pale brows furrowed. Hate. Pure, wordless hate. Naruko nodded. Me too. But later, I started hearing something else. Loneliness. Kurama stirred inside her, silent. Listening. Over time, Gaara spoke more. Not about Shukaku directly, but about dreams. He didn't have many, but he was starting to. He asked her about Kurama. Not in fear, but curiosity. Naruko didn't share everything. But she told him enough. We don't have to love them, she said. But we can understand them. And maybe they can understand us, too. From that seed, a whisper began. Not through the Hokage or the daimyo. But through Naruko. She started writing letters to the other villages. Not formal ones. Not treaties. Just words. From one person carrying a beast to another. She didn't demand unity. She didn't ask for secrets. She just shared stories. Of how Kurama used to growl at her for crying over broken toys. Of how she once asked him what his favorite smell was, only to discover that Kurama loved the scent of wildflowers after rain, though he pretended otherwise. She signed them simply. From one who hears the silence. Weeks passed. Then one day, a letter returned. It was short. Blunt. But real. Do you actually hear him? Or are you just pretending you know what it's like? Yugito. Naruko smiled. She's listening, she whispered. One by one, she began building a map. Not of geography, but of hearts. Yugito from Kumo. Utakata from Kiri. Roshi from Iwa. Han. Fu. Yagura, whose silence was heavier than stone. Naruko never asked them to join anything. She never claimed leadership. She just wrote. About fear. About listening. About how she still sometimes woke up and wondered if she was a person or a container. She hosted gatherings, unofficial ones. In neutral villages. Under fake names. Kurama joked that it sounded like a secret club, but he showed up anyway, through her chakra, pulsing gently when another beast was near. The first time Shukaku stirred across the fire from them, Kurama didn't snarl. He just said, I remember you. And for the first time in centuries, two-tailed beasts acknowledged each other without malice. Naruko facilitated, not by force, but with presence. She brought tea instead of tension. Questions instead of commands. She gave the other Jinchuriki something they had never been offered, a chance to not be alone in their experience. They didn't always get along. Old pain doesn't vanish with one good conversation. But the fact that they were talking at all was a revolution. And through it all, Kurama changed. He no longer dreamed of escape. He dreamed of stillness. Of dignity. Of no longer being hunted. You were never just a prison, he told her one night, as they rested beneath stars. You were a second chance. Naruko reached inward, palm to her heart, and whispered, and you were my first truth. She didn't save the world with Rasengans or transformations. She saved it one soul at a time. The more Naruko opened her heart to others like her, the more the world inside her began to shift. Not physically, but metaphysically. Kurama's presence, once a caged storm behind the bars of her seal, now walked with her in dreams. No longer a growling shadow, he began to appear beside her in that strange mindscape of red mist and black water. Sometimes as a voice, sometimes as an eye in the dark. And, increasingly, as a figure, a great fox with watchful, ancient eyes. One evening, Naruko sat alone in the quiet of her room, the window cracked open to let the breeze stir the candle flame. Meditation had become part of her nightly rhythm, not to suppress Kurama, but to hear him better. But this night felt different. The moment her eyes closed, she wasn't floating in the usual half-darkness of her seal. She was walking. Barefoot, across glowing earth. Each step pulsed light under her feet. The sky above was silver black, like the pause between dusk and memory. Kurama stood ahead. Not monstrous. Not massive. Still large, but softer. Not diminished, but peaceful. You're ready, he said. Not a growl. A statement. Ready for what? To remember. Not just your pain. Ours. The world around them rippled, and changed. 1,000 years ago. They stood on a battlefield, but not in the middle of war. Around them, towering trees burned. Ash fell like snow. Kurama's body, then free, wild, unbound, roared across the sky. People screamed. Shinobi fled. But one girl, a child with long black hair, stood still, her hands trembling but raised not in defense, but forgiveness. Naruko recognized her, not by face, but by feeling. That was you, Kurama said. Not as Naruko. But as someone before. She watched the girl step forward, untouched by fire, whispering words of peace no one could hear. Kurama's roar had faltered. I almost didn't burn that day. Almost. The scene melted. Next came a temple in the snow. Quiet chanting. A monk with orange robes and lines beneath his eyes sat cross-legged before a scroll that pulsed with chakra. In the shadows, a younger version of Kurama, smaller, twitchier, not yet full of hatred, curled, wary but curious. That monk had her eyes. You've always come back, Kurama said. Different names. Different faces. But always the same soul. Naruko's breath caught. You're saying I've met you before? More times than you've counted your birthdays. And each time, I failed to save you? Kurama blinked. No. Each time, you tried. And every time, the world failed us both. The next memory was not of destruction, but of laughter. Children running through a village square. A young man with sunlight in his hair carried baskets of fruit. Behind him, the 9 tails curled in an illusion form, a fox the size of a dog, watching silently. The villagers didn't scream. They waved. That man turned to Naruko through the mist of time and smiled. She could see it, a timeline where peace had almost taken root. But war came. It always came. That version of Kurama was sealed again. The boy died in a battle not his own. And the cycle continued. Back in the mindscape, Naruko fell to her knees. I've always been too late. No, Kurama said, stepping beside her, lowering his massive head so she could feel the warmth of his breath. You've always remembered just enough to try again. That's why I stayed. Why I still stay. He showed her more. Of his own first breath, when he was not Kurama the tailed beast, but simply chakra made flesh. A child of nature. A pure being, curious and free. He had not always been fury. He had once been wonder. Naruko cried, not out of sadness, but recognition. You're not a monster. Kurama looked at her then, really looked. And neither are you. For the first time in the history of Jinchuriki and tailed beasts, the barrier between host and spirit didn't dissolve through violence or domination. It melted through memory. And what remained was unity. Not fusion. Not control. Harmony. Kurama offered her a paw, not physically, but spiritually. A gesture of equal ground. Naruko took it. Their chakras touched, not in force, but in agreement. And when she opened her eyes again, back in her room, the candle had gone out. The air felt lighter. Her pulse steady. Inside her, Kurama's voice was softer now. Not from weakness, but peace. We've both lived 100 lives. Let's make this one matter. She whispered, we already are. Word traveled quietly through the village, Naruko wasn't just the fiery-haired girl who carried Kurama's chakra anymore. She and the 9 tails were something different now. Closer. More connected. People could feel it in the way she moved, calm and steady like the river after rain. The elders noticed first. Lady Tsunade, who had once worried about the destructive power inside Naruko, now watched with a soft smile. When she met Naruko in her office, she said simply, I hear you found a new way to listen. Naruko nodded. Kurama and I. We understand each other better. I think it's helping me understand others, too. The younger ninja were curious. Some came to watch her train, not to see how hard she could fight, but how she controlled her chakra with gentle hands and quiet breath. Sakura often joined her, sitting beside her as Naruko taught her to feel chakra as a conversation, not a weapon. Is it true you can hear Kurama's thoughts? Sakura asked one afternoon, eyes wide with wonder. Naruko smiled. Not just here. We talk. Like friends. Even Sasuke raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the change. He didn't say much, but when they sparred during exercises, his attacks felt less like tests and more like lessons, challenges meant to help her grow without breaking her spirit. Parents began to bring their children to Naruko's little gatherings, small circles under the maple trees where she told stories about friendship, courage, and kindness. The kids loved hearing about Kurama, not as a scary beast, but as a mischievous companion who liked riddles and jokes. One day, a shy little boy named Taro asked, do you think I could be friends with the beast inside me too? Naruko knelt down, her eyes kind. Everyone has something inside them. Sometimes it's loud, sometimes quiet. The trick is to listen, not fight. Kurama's voice came softly in her mind, and to be patient. The villagers began to change how they saw Jinchuriki, not as scary or dangerous, but as people with stories, feelings, and hopes just like theirs. They saw that when Naruko and Kurama were together, they made the village stronger, not because of power, but because of trust. Even other Jinchuriki who had once been lonely started reaching out, inspired by Naruko's example. They found courage to share their feelings, to ask for help, and to believe in peace. Naruko understood that her journey wasn't just about her and Kurama anymore. It was about all of them, about building a world where no one had to be afraid of the monsters inside. And with every smile, every kind word, every hand held, that world grew a little brighter. As the seasons shifted from spring to early summer, the village buzzed with excitement for the annual Festival of Lights, a celebration of peace and new beginnings. This year, the festival felt especially important. Naruko had quietly invited the other Jinchuriki she'd been in touch with, hoping to create a place where they could meet not as legends or weapons, but as people. On the first evening of the festival, the village square shimmered with lanterns floating like stars caught in a gentle breeze. Stalls lined the streets, offering sweet dango, paper fans, and small charms painted with colorful symbols. Naruko stood beside Kurama's chakra, which glowed softly within her, as she watched the other Jinchuriki arrive. There was Gaara, still serious but with a softer gaze than before. Yugito smiled warmly, her two tails twitching in her excitement. Utakata's eyes sparkled with quiet laughter, and Han arrived carrying gifts wrapped in delicate cloth. No grand announcements. No formal ceremonies. Just a circle of new friends sharing stories. Naruko felt her heart swell as each person spoke, not about battles or power, but about dreams, fears, and hopes. Gaara told a story about a time when he helped a lost child find her way home, his sand weaving a gentle path through the forest. Yugito laughed softly, recalling the strange foods she tried in Konoha, and how Naruko had helped her find the sweetest berries. Utakata shared a poem about a quiet river, flowing even through rocks and storms. Naruko listened and shared her own memories, of hearing Kurama's thoughts as a child, of learning to see him not as a monster but as a friend. The villagers watched quietly, some with tears in their eyes, seeing these powerful figures simply as people who struggled, who loved, who grew. Later, when the lanterns were released into the night sky, Naruko felt Kurama's presence pulse gently inside her, like a heartbeat syncing with hers. "Thank you," he said, softly, "for showing us all that even the fiercest storms can become calm seas." Naruko smiled. "We're all learning. Together." As the lanterns drifted upward, carrying hopes and wishes, the village was filled not with fear or misunderstanding, but with light. And for the first time, Naruko knew the path ahead, while still unknown, was one they would walk side by side. It was a quiet afternoon when a small knock came at Naruko's door. She opened it to find a boy no older than 10, eyes wide and trembling. "My name's Kaido," he whispered. I think there's something inside me. Something scary. Like a monster." Naruko knelt down to his level, her smile warm and gentle. "It's okay to be scared. I've been there too." Kaido swallowed hard, glancing down at his shaking hands. "But it roars inside me sometimes. I don't know how to stop it." Naruko's heart tightened, remembering how long it had taken her to understand Kurama, not as a beast to fight, but as a part of herself to listen to. "Do you want to hear something?" she asked softly. Kaido nodded, eyes shining with cautious hope. Naruko closed her eyes, reaching deep inside her chakra. She didn't push or force, she simply listened. And in the stillness, Kurama's voice came, calm and steady. "Fear is just a shadow. But every shadow can be understood." She opened her eyes and took Kaido's hand. "I've heard the beast inside me since I was born. Sometimes it's loud, sometimes quiet. But I learned that if I listen carefully, not with my ears but with my heart, I can understand what it wants to say." Kaido blinked. "It wants to say something?" Naruko nodded. "Yes. Sometimes it's scared. Sometimes it just wants to be seen and not pushed away. The more we fight, the louder it gets. But if we listen, it can become a friend." Together, they sat in the garden, surrounded by soft rustling leaves. Naruko taught Kaido to close his eyes and breathe deeply, not to hold the fear, but to watch it gently, like a cloud passing in the sky. She shared stories of her conversations with Kurama, the times he was lonely, the times he was afraid, and how she never stopped talking to him, no matter how hard it got. Kaido smiled faintly. "Do you think my beast wants to be my friend too?" Naruko squeezed his hand. "I know it does. And I'll help you listen, whenever you need." Kurama's chakra shimmered inside her, a quiet pulse of approval. In that moment, a frightened boy found courage. And Naruko knew her gift, her ability to hear and understand, was meant to help many more, not with force, but with kindness. Kaido's first steps into Naruko's world were quiet ones. At first, he was hesitant, shy, almost afraid to speak openly about the beast he sensed lurking inside him. But Naruko welcomed him with patience and gentle smiles, never rushing, always listening. Their first meeting had been simple, a knock on her door, a small boy with wide eyes and trembling hands. Now, weeks later, Kaido visited regularly, drawn by the calm that seemed to wrap around Naruko like a protective cloak. Naruko had taught him how to breathe deeply, how to close his eyes and listen, not just with his ears, but with his heart. "Your beast isn't a monster," she told him one afternoon as they sat beneath the blossoming sakura tree. "It's a part of you that's scared, just like you." Kaido was beginning to believe her. The roars he once feared were becoming whispers, soft and sometimes even playful. Sometimes, when he was quiet enough, he thought he heard a voice, not cruel or angry, but curious. Naruko smiled knowingly. "That's it. That's the beginning of friendship. Kurama, always present inside Naruko, watched their progress with a mixture of amusement and pride. He remembered what it was like to be feared and misunderstood. Watching Kaido slowly open his heart made something inside the great fox soften. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in pinks and golds, Naruko brought Kaido to a quiet hill overlooking the village. The breeze stirred the grass, carrying with it the faint scent of wildflowers, Kurama's favorite, she would later tell Kaido with a secret smile. "Close your eyes," Naruko instructed softly. Kaido obeyed, the nervous flutter inside him easing with each breath. "Now, listen to the silence," Naruko said. For a moment, there was nothing but the rustle of leaves and distant laughter from the village below. Then, faint and gentle, came a voice, warm and deep, not loud or frightening. "Hello," it said. Kaido's eyes flew open. "Did you hear that?" Naruko nodded. That was Kurama. He's saying hello. Kaido's face lit with wonder and a touch of disbelief. Can I talk to him?" Naruko smiled. "He talks through me. If you want, I can help you listen." Over the following months, their meetings became a sacred ritual. Naruko taught Kaido how to feel chakra as a language, a thread connecting soul to soul. Kurama's presence grew steadier, no longer a distant roar but a gentle companion. Kaito began sharing his own fears and dreams aloud, sometimes with Naruko, sometimes just into the quiet, knowing that Kurama was listening too. "Do you think he's lonely?" Kaito asked one night as stars blinked overhead. Naruko nodded thoughtfully. "I think every beast is, at first. They've been trapped or hurt for so long, they forget how to trust." Kurama's voice came, soft and surprisingly tender. "Trust is the hardest thing to give. And the most powerful to receive." Kaito smiled, feeling something shift inside him, a spark of hope. Their friendship blossomed, touching not just Kaito and Naruko, but others in the village. Seeing Kaito grow braver inspired other children to face their fears, knowing they weren't alone. Naruko's unique gift, hearing Kurama's thoughts, became a bridge for many, a living example that understanding could heal wounds that swords never could. As seasons turned, Kaito no longer feared the beast inside him. Instead, he learned to walk beside it, sometimes rough, sometimes quiet, but always part of who he was. And through it all, Naruko and Kurama stood beside him, steady as the earth and sky. Days turned into weeks, and Kaito found himself visiting Naruko's home more often. The house, once just a quiet place, now felt like a sanctuary, warm, safe, and full of gentle light. It was a place where fear could be spoken aloud and kindness always listened. One afternoon, Naruko invited Kaito to help her in her small garden. The air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers, and soft petals drifted around them like pink snow. "Kaito," Naruko said, handing him a small watering can, "taking care of plants is a lot like taking care of your inner self." Kaito frowned, a little confused. "See," Naruko explained, "plants need water, sunlight, and patience. They don't grow all at once. Sometimes, they need time to stretch their roots underground before they bloom." Kaito looked down at the tiny sprout pushing through the soil. "So, my beast needs patience too?" Naruko smiled. "Exactly. Sometimes, it's hiding beneath the surface. You might not see it, but it's growing stronger inside you." As they worked together, Naruko gently shared more about Kurama's past lives, how even a powerful being like him had times of loneliness and doubt. She told stories of her own fears when she was younger, and how listening to Kurama's thoughts helped her turn those fears into understanding. Kaito listened intently, his eyes wide with wonder. "Do you think Kurama was scared when he was younger?" Naruko nodded thoughtfully. "I think so. Everyone, even the strongest, feels scared sometimes. The important part is what you do with that fear." Kurama's voice echoed softly inside Naruko's mind. "Fear is a door. Open it with courage, and you'll find what's waiting inside isn't a monster, but a friend." Kaito smiled, feeling a warmth spread inside him, a glow that chased away the shadows he'd felt for so long. Over time, Kaito's visits became part of his own journey. He started sharing his thoughts more freely, learning to trust not just Naruko and Kurama, but himself. He practiced breathing and listening, finding that the roar inside him could become a gentle voice. One evening, during a quiet moment, Kaito asked, "Naruko, will I always hear the beast inside me?" Naruko looked at him with kindness. "Maybe. But that's okay. It means you're alive and growing. The important thing is you don't have to face it alone." Kurama's voice hummed in agreement, "And remember, I'm always here, too." Together, the three formed a bond, a triangle of trust and understanding, that reached beyond fear and anger. And as Kaido's heart grew braver, so did the village. More children came forward with their own fears, encouraged by Naruko's example. Parents began to see their children's struggles not as curses but as journeys of growth. Naruko's gift, the ability to hear Kurama's thoughts, became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even the loudest beasts could be quieted with love. And Kaido, once a frightened boy, became a shining light of that truth. One calm evening, as the sun melted into the horizon and painted the sky in soft shades of pink and gold, Naruko and Kaido sat side by side beneath the great maple tree near the village edge. The air was warm but gentle, carrying the scent of wildflowers and earth. Kurama's chakra pulsed softly within Naruko, a quiet, comforting rhythm, like the steady beat of a heart. Kaito looked up at the sky, then back at Naruko. His eyes shone with a calmness that hadn't been there before. "Naruko," he said softly, "I used to think the beast inside me was something to fight. Something to be afraid of." Naruko smiled, her gaze steady and warm. "I know. I used to think that too. But then I learned to listen." Kaito nodded slowly. "And when I listened, it wasn't scary anymore. It was like the beast was part of me. Like a friend who needed help." Kurama's voice came gently into Naruko's mind. "The strongest bonds are built not with force, but with understanding." Naruko reached out and placed her hand over Kaido's. "You're never alone with your beast. We all carry something inside us, some part that's wild, or scared, or powerful. But when we listen and share, we find peace." The breeze rustled the maple leaves, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath in quiet harmony. Kaido smiled, a true, bright smile filled with hope. Naruko looked at Kurama, feeling the deep connection that had changed everything for them both. "We're more than just host and beast," she whispered. "We're partners. Friends. Family." Kurama's presence shimmered warmly within her, a promise echoing in the silence. "Together, we can walk any path." And as the stars began to twinkle overhead, Naruko, Kaido, and Kurama sat beneath the ancient tree, bound by trust, love, and the shared journey of hearing, understanding, and finally embracing the voices within. A peaceful world blossomed, not from battles won, but from hearts opened. And that was the greatest victory of all. Years passed, not with fanfare, but with quiet growth. Kaido, once a frightened child, grew into a young teacher, not of jutsu or battle, but of balance. In the village square, he opened a small garden called the Inner Grove, where children and even adults could come to sit, breathe, and listen to themselves. He taught them what Naruko had taught him, that every heart holds a voice worth hearing, even the wild ones. Villagers began speaking more openly about their emotions, fear, anger, hope, dreams. The idea of a beast within no longer frightened them. It became a symbol of something else, potential. Power wrapped in emotion, waiting to be understood. Naruko continued her quiet work too. She never called herself a hero. She didn't have to. People knew her by the peace she carried. Some came to her just to sit and talk, others asked about Kurama, curious, no longer afraid. Sometimes, a child would ask, "Is Kurama really in there?" And Naruko would grin and tap her chest. "He's in here, always. Listening. And sometimes, laughing." Kurama had changed too. Once fierce and guarded, he found joy in these gentle days. He spoke more often, not with rage, but with wisdom. And though no one else could hear him, his thoughts lived on through Naruko's words and actions. "We've changed the world, haven't we?" he mused one spring morning. Naruko, standing at the edge of Kaido's blooming garden, whispered back, "One heart at a time." And that was enough. The village no longer whispered behind backs about Jinchuriki. They told stories instead, of Naruko and Kurama, of Kaido and his quiet strength, of how even the most feared spirits could become the kindest guides when someone chose to listen. Under the great maple tree, a small plaque was placed. It read, "To those who choose understanding over fear, may your inner voices be heard with love." And in that village, so long filled with silence and suspicion, grew something stronger than power. It grew peace. It grew kindness. It grew home. Dear YouTube family, that's all for today. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me. Thank you for watching. Warm regards. 6 Path Weeb.